My husband and his friends thought it'd be funny to leave me stranded in a small town in Italy after a fight. Let's see how she gets back, they laughed, driving off. I didn't return. A month later, he tracked me down in Greece. I was already starting over. Let's see how she gets back, Gabriel laughed, his voice cutting through the evening air as he slammed the car door. The taillights of our rental car grew smaller and smaller, disappearing around the bend of the narrow Italian street, leaving nothing but dust and the echo of my husband's friend's laughter. I stood frozen, my mouth still open in mid-sentence. The argument we'd been having outside the small cafe suddenly rendered meaningless by his unthinkable action. He's coming back, I whispered to myself, drawing curious stares from locals enjoying their evening meals at sidewalk tables. This is just to scare me. But the knot in my stomach tightened as minutes stretched into an hour, the sky darkening over the unfamiliar town, whose name I couldn't even pronounce correctly. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this journey. If you're drawn to stories of women who find strength in unexpected places after betrayal, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps support more stories of resilience and rebirth. Now let's witness how one abandoned woman turned an act of cruelty into the beginning of her freedom. When I begged Gabriel not to drink so much at lunch, I never imagined it would escalate this far. His friends, college buddies celebrating their annual guys' reunion that I'd been reluctantly invited to join, had egged him on when I suggested we head back to our hotel. She's always controlling you, man, Pete had said, ordering another round. When I stood up to leave, Gabriel had followed me outside, his words slurred but his anger precise. Your purse has your passport, right? He'd sneered before climbing into the driver's seat. Then you'll figure it out. You're so smart, always telling me what to do. Night fell completely as reality sank in. The charming Italian town that had seemed so picturesque by day now felt threatening. I counted my cash. 37 dollars. Not enough for a flight home, barely enough for a night's lodging. My credit cards were in Gabriel's wallet. He'd offered to carry them earlier when my small purse had been too full. I found the cheapest pension I could, a dingy room above a bakery with a narrow bed and a sink in the corner. The elderly woman who showed me to the room spoke no English, but seemed to understand my situation, patting my arm sympathetically. He blocked me, I whispered to myself in disbelief, staring at my phone. 27 calls to Gabriel, all sent straight to voicemail. Text messages delivered but unanswered. I tried Pete, then Marco, then every one of Gabriel's friends who'd been in that camp, all blocked. A shudder ran through me as I realized this hadn't been a momentary impulse, but a calculated humiliation. Sleep came in broken fragments, interrupted by hopeful checks of my phone and renewed panic. By morning, I'd convinced myself this nightmare would end. Gabriel would return, apologetic but ready to blame me for overreacting to his joke. I'd be angry but relieved enough to move forward, to return to our carefully constructed life in Boston, where he was a respected architect and I was his supportive wife who'd set aside her own design career to manage their home and social calendar. But he didn't come. On the second day, I rationed my remaining money, buying only a panini for lunch while walking the town's perimeter, checking every hotel and restaurant for any sign of our tour group. By evening, I realized they had continued their planned journey, moving on to Florence without me. On the third day, a kind cafe owner, who noticed me lingering outside his establishment, offered me free espresso and, in broken English, directions to the local police station. The officer there seemed unsurprised by my story, as if abandoned tourists were a regular occurrence. But his limited English and my non-existent Italian left me with nothing but a filed report and a sympathetic nod. That afternoon, I made the hardest decision of my life. Standing before a cramped pawn shop window, I twisted off my wedding ring, the 2-carat diamond Gabriel had upgraded on our 5th anniversary, replacing the modest band we'd started with. The shopkeeper offered me far less than it's worth, but enough to fund the next step of my journey, wherever that might be. America, call family, the pawnbroker suggested, counting out euros. I nodded mechanically, but inside a different plan was forming. Family meant explaining, meant hearing my mother's "I told you so" about Gabriel's temper, meant facing friends who'd seen the cracks in our marriage I'd tried so hard to plaster over. The bus station was quiet when I arrived, its electronic board displaying destinations I'd only read about in travel magazines. An overnight bus to Rome connected to ferries, to other buses, to places where Gabriel and his friends wouldn't think to look for me if they ever bothered to trans. My finger hovered over my father's name in my contacts. One call and he'd wire money for a flight home. One call and I'd return to the life I'd built, where I'd slowly made myself smaller to accommodate Gabriel's expanding ego and demands. A memory surfaced, Gabriel jokingly hiding my portfolios when I'd mentioned returning to interior design work. "Why complicate things?" he'd asked. "We don't need the money, and I need you focused on our life." I'd laughed it off then, but sitting in that grimy station, I saw it for what it was. Another fence in the pen he'd built around me. "Where you go?" asked the ticket agent, an older woman with kind eyes, who'd been watching me stare at the departure board for nearly 20 minutes. "Greece, thus," I answered, the decision crystallizing as I spoke it. "The furthest coastal village you can get me to." 14 hours later, I stumbled off the final bus in my journey, my body stiff from uncomfortable seats and tension. The smell of salt air and olive groves greeted me as I took in the whitewashed buildings of a village whose name I couldn't pronounce. My phone battery had died somewhere between countries. My stomach was hollow with hunger, and the weight of what I'd done, or what had been done to me, pressed on my shoulders. Exhaustion made the edges of my vision blur as I wandered toward what appeared to be the town center. 3 days of emotional whiplash had left me raw, cycling between rage at Gabriel, fear of my uncertain future, and a strange, unexpected flicker of something that felt dangerously like liberation. My remaining euros would cover perhaps 2 nights in the cheapest room I could find. After that, I had no plan, no friends, no words in the local language beyond please and thank you. But as I watched the sunset paint the Aegean waters golden pink, a calmness settled over me that I hadn't felt in years. Gabriel had meant to teach me a lesson about dependence. Instead, he'd accidentally set me free. The Greek sun beat down mercilessly as I wandered further from the village. My feet blistered inside impractical sandals meant for sightseeing, not hiking. My water bottle had emptied hours ago, and the combination of dehydration, hunger, and emotional exhaustion made the world tilt around me. Silver green trees lined the dusty path, their leaves shimmering like coins in the breeze. Olive groves, I realized dimly, just before my knees buckled beneath me. The ground rushed up to meet my face, but I barely felt the impact. Darkness edged my vision as a strange calm washed over me. Perhaps this was fitting. Abandoned by my husband in one foreign country, only to collapse alone in another. I closed my eyes, giving in to the exhaustion that had been building since Gabriel drove away. "Phosmo! Kira!" A woman's voice cut through my haze, followed by weathered hands turning me over. An elderly face swam into focus, deep lines etched around kind eyes wide with concern. She spoke rapidly in Greek, patting my cheeks and offering a canteen. The water revived me enough to sit up, though my head still spun violently. She introduced herself as Elena, repeating her name while pointing to herself. I mimicked her gesture weakly. "Alexis." Elena helped me to my feet, her small frame surprisingly strong as she supported my weight. She pointed toward a stone farmhouse nestled among the olive trees and made walking motions with her fingers. I nodded, lacking the strength to resist, as she guided me slowly up the hill. The farmhouse kitchen welcomed me with the scent of herbs hanging from wooden beams and something savory bubbling on an ancient stove. Elena settled me at a worn wooden table before calling out to someone. A man's voice responded, and moments later, an elderly gentleman with a sun-darkened face and silver mustache appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a cloth. Nikos, Elena said, pointing to him. Her husband nodded at me cautiously, his eyes questioning but not unwelcoming. Elena poured cool water into a glass and pressed it into my hands, followed by a bowl of simple soup. My stomach growled audibly as the aroma reached my nose, prompting a smile from Elena. That evening passed in a blur of broken communication. I tried to explain my situation through a combination of limited words, hand gestures, and eventually tears. Elena nodded as if she understood completely, though I knew she couldn't possibly grasp the details. Nikos remained quiet but attentive, occasionally asking questions that Elena translated through gestures. They offered me their spare room, a simple space with whitewashed walls and a narrow bed covered by a handmade quilt. Too exhausted to protest, I collapsed into much-needed sleep. Morning arrived with roosters crowing and the aroma of fresh bread. I have found clean clothes folded at the foot of my bed, a simple cotton dress and a cardigan that looked decades old but freshly laundered. They hung loosely on my frame but offered a welcome change from my travel-worn outfit. In the kitchen, Elena beamed at my appearance, immediately serving strong coffee and fresh bread with olive oil and honey. With daylight clearing my mind, embarrassment crept in. These strangers had taken me in without question, fed me, clothed me. I needed to explain myself, to offer payment, to move on. Through broken English and the translation app on my phone, now charged thanks to an adapter Nikos had produced, I attempted to convey my gratitude and intention to return to the village. Elena's face fell immediately. She shook her head vigorously, pointing outside where rain now pattered against the windows, then to my still blistered feet. "Stay," she insisted, one of the few English words she knew. "Rest." Over the next 3 days, I made several attempts to leave, each met with gentle resistance. Once, with my purse in hand and shoes on my feet, Elena intercepted me at the door, her expression so wounded that guilt washed over me. She took my hand and led me to a small wooden box on the mantel, opening it to reveal photographs. Her fingers trembled as she pointed to a young woman with Elena's eyes and Nikos' smile. "Sophia," she said softly, then pointed far away. "Australia." Her eyes filled with tears as she made a cradling motion with her arms, then held her hand at waist height, indicating a child. "Grandbaby," she managed in English, pointing to a more recent photo of an infant. "No C." I understood then. Elena saw in me a surrogate for her absent daughter, a presence to fill the hollow space left behind. Rather than feeling manipulated, my heart ached for her loss. I nodded slowly and returned my purse to the hook by the door. Each day brought new routines as I gradually integrated into their farm life. Elena showed me how to gather eggs from the chickens without frightening them, how to hang laundry so the mountain breeze would catch it just right. Nikos taught me to identify weeds among the vegetable garden, his patience evident as I mistakenly pulled up an herb the first time. The work was physical, nothing like my carefully curated life in Boston, but satisfying in ways I'd forgotten existed. My body, accustomed to designer gyms and measured exercise routines, protested at first. New calluses formed on my hands, and muscles I didn't know I had ached each evening. But with each passing day, the pain lessened and my strength grew. More importantly, the constant mental cycling through my abandonment began to quiet, replaced by the simpler concerns of farm tasks and language learning. At night, sitting on the small porch while Elena knitted and Nico smoked his pipe, I found myself experiencing moments of peace. The betrayal still cut deep, But here, surrounded by ancient olive trees and the rhythm of rural life, it began to feel less like the end of my story and more like an unexpected chapter. 2 weeks after my arrival, Elena sat beside me as we shelled peas from the garden. She studied my face, her expression thoughtful, before asking slowly in her improving English, "Home? You want go home?" She made a plain motion with her hand, then pointed toward America. The question hit me with unexpected force. Home. The word conjured our sleek Boston brownstone with its designer furniture and carefully coordinated decor. It also brought Gabriel's controlling behavior into sharp focus, his helpful management of our finances that left me without independent access, his subtle discouragement of my friendships, his dismissive attitude toward my career aspirations. Tears spilled down my cheeks as words poured out in a language Elena couldn't fully understand, but emotions that transcended the barrier. I told her about Gabriel's betrayal, about years of slowly surrendering pieces of myself to keep peace, about the humiliation of being abandoned like unwanted baggage in a foreign country. Elena's weathered hand covered mine as I spoke. When I finished, she pointed to her heart, then to the farm around us, and finally to me. The message was clear. I had a place here, if I wanted it work. I said carefully, mimicking Nikos tending the olive trees, I stay, I work. Elena's smile bloomed like the sunrise over the Aegean. She nodded, squeezing my hand before returning to the peas, as if we had just agreed to something as simple as tomorrow's menu rather than a complete redirection of my life. My decision to stay marked the beginning of my education in olive farming. The very next morning, Elena shook me awake while stars still dotted the sky, handing me work clothes and sturdy boots that had belonged to Sophia. Half asleep, I followed her and Nikos to the grove, where the first hint of dawn barely illuminated the ancient trees. Elise, Elena said, pointing to the fruit-laden branches. She demonstrated the proper technique, gently combing the branches with wooden rakes to release the olives onto nets spread below. My first attempt sent twigs and leaves showering down along with precious few olives, earning me a patient correction from Nikos. By mid-morning, the sun blazed overhead, my shoulders burned with exertion, and my city-soft hands had developed their first blisters. Boston lady hands, Elena teased, gently examining my palms. At lunch break, she disappeared into the house, returning with a homemade salve that smelled of herbs and beeswax. The cooling relief was immediate as she spread it across my raw skin. Tomorrow better, she promised, and surprisingly, she was right. Each day brought improvement. My technique refined, my strength built, my hands toughened. Within weeks, I could work alongside them for hours without complaint, taking pride in the growing piles of harvested fruit. The sorting process proved even more demanding than the harvest. Seated at a long table under the shade of a pergola, we meticulously separated the olives by quality, the perfect ones destined for the premium oil, slightly blemished for second grade, damaged ones for soap making. Elena watched me with hawk eyes at first, correcting my mistakes with gentle nudges. Gradually, her corrections became less frequent as my eye developed for the subtle distinctions. You learn fast, Nikos commented one evening, his broken English improving alongside my rudimentary Greek. It was the highest compliment he'd paid me, and warmth spread through my chest at his approval. My education extended beyond the groves into Elena's kitchen, a place that initially intimidated me with its lack of modern conveniences. In Boston, I had considered myself a decent cook, capable of following recipes from gourmet magazines for dinner parties that impressed Gabriel's colleagues. But Elena's cooking involved no measuring cups or precise temperatures, just generations of knowledge passed through hands and observation. Watch, she'd say, kneading dough for bread with practiced motions. I'd mimic her movements, failing spectacularly at first. My initial loaves emerged from the outdoor stone oven misshapen and either underbaked or burnt beyond recognition. Practice, Elena encouraged, breaking apart even my worst attempts to taste them all. Learning is waste. Her acceptance of imperfection struck me as revolutionary. In my previous life, mistakes had been something to hide, not stepping stones to mastery. The simplicity of their meals revealed how processed my American diet had been. Here, everything came from their land or neighboring farms. Vegetables still warm from the sun, eggs collected that morning, cheese from the goats down the road. The flavors were vibrant and clean, needing little enhancement beyond olive oil, lemon, and herbs from Elena's garden. My body changed on this diet and work regimen. The designer clothes I'd arrived in grew loose as unnecessary weight melted away, replaced by lean muscle. My complexion, once maintained through expensive creams, glowed from simple olive oil soap and honest sweat. When I caught sight of myself in the small mirror above the bathroom sink, a stranger looked back, tanned, stronger, somehow more substantial despite weighing less. As my Greek vocabulary expanded, Elena and I found more ways to communicate beyond labor and food. During evening breaks, she brought out her photo albums, pointing to black and white images of her youth in the village. I was startled to discover she'd once been a school teacher before returning to her family's olive business after marriage. You? She asked, mimicking typing on a keyboard. I took out my phone, showing her photos of my interior design projects from before marriage. The career Gabriel had dismissed as a hobby, Elena studied them with genuine interest, pointing to elements she liked and making appreciative sounds. Beautiful thinking, she said, tapping her temple. Her validation of my creative work brought tears to my eyes. Such simple acknowledgement, yet something Gabriel had gradually withdrawn as our marriage progressed. One rainy afternoon, Elena taught me to knit, her patience endless as I dropped stitches and created uneven rows. My first completed project was a simple scarf, lumpy and imperfect, but entirely made by my hands. I wrapped it around my neck with more pride than I'd felt wearing the designer cashmere Gabrielle had given me for Christmas. Other handmade possessions followed. A clay mug formed under Nikos's guidance. A woven basket I learned to make from a neighbor. Each item represented hours of learning and connection, carrying stories that no purchased luxury ever could. My collection grew as my attachment to material perfection diminished. After 3 months of working without compensation beyond room and board, Elena approached me one morning with Nikos at her side. They led me to the small building where they pressed and bottled their olive oil, showing me the modest inventory they produced from our harvest. Market day, Elena announced, pointing to the calendar. You come. The village market bustled with activity, farmers and artisans displaying their goods, while locals and the occasional tourist browsed among the stalls. Elena and Nikos set up their simple table, arranging bottles of golden green oil alongside olive soap and jars of preserved olives. To my surprise, they positioned me at the front of the table, encouraging me to speak with customers. My broken Greek and their limited English created moments of confusion and laughter, but sales steadily accumulated throughout the day. As the market closed, Elena handed me an envelope containing euros. Your part, she said simply. Fair work, fair pay. I stared at the modest sum, perhaps enough for a single meal at the restaurants Gabriel and I had frequented, yet this money represented something I hadn't possessed in years. Independence. Earned through my own labor, no strings attached, no subtle expectations of gratitude or compliance, just fair compensation for honest work. That night, I placed the envelope under my pillow, occasionally reaching to touch it, as if to confirm its reality. In our decade of marriage, Gabriel had gradually taken control of our finances to simplify things, leaving me with credit cards linked to accounts. He monitored this. This small stack of euros represented the first step toward rebuilding a life that belonged fully to me. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized I hadn't thought about Gabriel at all during market day. My mind too occupied with Greek phrases for transactions and pride in our products. The space he'd occupied in my thoughts had shrunk, replaced by olive groves, kitchen lessons, and the growing certainty that I was capable of far more than he had ever allowed me to believe. The following week, Elena and Nikos invited me to join them for dinner at the taverna in the village square, a first since my arrival. Dressed in a borrowed blouse from Elena, I felt a nervous flutter as we entered the bustling establishment. The owner, Stavas, greeted the couple with enthusiastic embraces before turning curious eyes to me. Our American, Elena said proudly in Greek, a phrase I'd learned to recognize. Stavy smiled warmly, ushering us to what was clearly their regular table. Over plates of grilled fish and village wine, Nikos cleared his throat and spoke in careful English. Alexis, we want talk business with you. His seriousness caught me off guard. Had I made some mistake? Was it time for me to move on? Elena reached across the table, patting my hand reassuringly before continuing where her husband left off. We old now, 68, 70 years. She pointed between herself and Nikos. No children here. Sophia not coming back. Nikos nodded solemnly. We think retire soon, 2, 3 years. But olive trees, he made a sweeping gesture, 200 years old, need young hands. My breath caught as I began to understand. Elena smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You learn fast. Work hard. We teach everything. Then she spread her hands as if offering something. Business yours. The proposition stunned me. They barely knew me, a foreigner who'd stumbled into their lives just months ago. Yet here they were, offering a future I hadn't dared imagine. But I don't know enough, I stammered. The trees, the pressing, the business side. You learn, Nico said firmly. We teach, no rush. That night marked the beginning of my true apprenticeship, no longer just an extra pair of hands. I became heir to generations of knowledge. Each morning, Nikos took me through different sections of their groves, explaining how soil variations affected flavor profiles, how to identify early signs of disease, when precisely to harvest each section for optimal oil quality. Elena focused on teaching me the business records, a combination of handwritten ledgers and basic computer spreadsheets their grandson had set up during a holiday visit years ago. Her method of tracking expenses and income was functional but outdated. Seeing an opportunity to contribute beyond physical labor, I spent evenings updating their systems, creating digital records that made inventory and sales tracking simpler. Look, I showed Elena one night, demonstrating how to filter the spreadsheet to show which oil varieties sold best at which markets. Her eyes widened as patterns emerged from the numbers. Smart, she nodded approvingly. Boston lady brain good for business. With their blessing, I began implementing small marketing improvements. Our hand-labeled bottles received updated tags with information about flavor profiles and food pairings, knowledge I'd gleaned from countless cooking lessons with Elena. I created a simple brochure about their traditional methods, answering the questions tourists frequently asked at our market stand. My improving Greek helped forge connections beyond Elena and Nikos's immediate circle. The pharmacist who provided Elena's blood pressure medication began stopping by our market stall for conversations that extended beyond transactions. The baker's wife invited me to join her weekly coffee gathering with other village women, an intimidating but invaluable immersion in local language and customs. Stavas from the taverna became an unexpected ally when he began featuring our premium oil as a table offering, placing small cards with our new labels prominently on each table. Good for you, good for me, he explained with a wink when I thanked him. Word spread and soon 2 other restaurants in neighboring towns contacted us about supplying their establishments. 6 months into my new life, I attended the baptism of the butcher's granddaughter, my first formal village celebration. Standing in the back of the small church, I watched the community ritual with a lump in my throat. The elderly priest noticed my presence and made a point of greeting me afterward, switching to halting English learned during seminary in Athens. You bring new life to Old Grove, he said, his roomy eyes twinkling. Good for Village. Young people leave for Athens, for America. Village needs new blood. His acceptance seemed to remove the last barrier. Invitations flowed more freely after that. To name day celebrations, impromptu gatherings at the beach, even a village committee meeting about the upcoming summer festival. Each event wove another strand into the web of connection holding me in place. Yana, the weaver whose stall stood beside ours at the weekly market, became a particular friend. 40-some and widowed young, she possessed a sharp wit and pragmatic outlook that reminded me of my college roommate. Our conversations, conducted in my improving Greek and her excellent English, ranged from business strategies to village gossip to more personal reflections. You never speak of America, she observed one quiet afternoon as we packed up our unsold goods. Family there? Friends? The question pierced me unexpectedly. I'd grown so focused on building my new life that I'd pushed thoughts of my old one. My parents died years ago, a few friends, but I trailed off, realizing how Gabriel had gradually isolated me from my support network, always finding reasons why my college friends were problematic or work colleagues used me. Yana nodded knowingly. The husband who left you in Italy, she said. You never say his name. Gabriel, I said, the syllables feeling foreign on my tongue after months of silence. His name is Gabriel. And he never searched for you? Her directness was refreshing after months of Elena and Nikos' gentle avoidance of the tea. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't checked my phone. I gestured vaguely. I'd powered it on occasionally to take photos, but had abandoned my American email and social accounts, unwilling to confront whatever might be waiting there. Yana's raised eyebrow challenged me. Perhaps time to look, not for him, for you, to close the door properly. Her words stayed with me. That evening, after helping Elena prepare dinner, I retreated to my room and powered up my old phone, connecting to the farmhouse's basic Wi-Fi. With trembling fingers, I logged into my long-neglected email account. Hundreds of unread messages filled the screen. Scanning the senders, I spotted several from old friends, their subject lines evolving from casual check-ins to concerned inquiries. A surge of shame washed over me. I disappeared from their lives without explanation, just as thoroughly as I'd vanished from Gabriel's. A thread from my former design mentor caught my eye. Job opportunity, followed by increasingly urgent follow-ups. Opening it revealed that she'd recommended me for a remote consulting position with a sustainable building materials company. The final email, dated just 2 weeks earlier, indicated the position was still open if I was interested. Before I could consider this unexpected bridge to my former life, another email sender froze my fingers on the screen. Gabriel Davis, subject. I know where you are. The timestamp showed it had arrived just hours earlier. Heart pounding, I clicked it open. Alexis, it's taken months and a private investigator, but I finally tracked you to that back QU in Greece. This has gone on long enough. I'm coming to bring you home and end this ridiculous tantrum. My flight lands in Athens on Thursday. Be ready, 3 days from now. The room spun around me as panic and anger collided in my chest. How dare he, after abandoning me? After months without a word, he expected to simply collect me like misplaced luggage? I stumbled downstairs, the phone clutched in my hand. Elena looked up from the account ledger spread across the kitchen table, her smile fading as she registered my expression. Bad news from America, she asked gently. Gabriel, I managed. He's coming here Thursday. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. She reached beneath the ledger and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table toward me. Good timing then, she said. Was waiting for right moment. Inside, I found legal papers bearing my name alongside Elena and Nikos, written in Greek with English translations. Partnership agreement, Elena explained. 1/3 business. Yours now, not future, now. Tears blurred my vision as I stared at the document, understanding its significance. Not just employment or apprenticeship, but legitimate partnership. Not just a place to stay, but a foundation to build upon. Not charity, but earned recognition. You choose what happens Thursday, Elena said firmly, tapping the papers. You have home here, business here, friends here. She pointed to the phone in my hand. That man, he no longer decides. The truth of her words settled over me like a mantle of certainty. For the first time since being abandoned in that Italian town, I felt not just surviving, but anchored. Gabriel was coming, but he would find a very different woman than the one he'd left behind. The following days passed in a blur of preparation, not the kind Gabriel would expect. No packing of bags, no tearful goodbyes, but emotional fortification. I visited Katerina, the village's only lawyer, who helped me draft divorce papers in both Greek and English. I contacted my old design mentor, tentatively accepting the remote consulting opportunity. I even wrote emails to the friends I'd left behind, offering brief explanations, without apologies. Thursday arrived with a perfect Greek summer sky, cloudless and bright. I was in the processing shed, testing olive oil samples with Nikos, when the unfamiliar sound of a rental car engine broke the afternoon quiet. Elena appeared at the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and resolve. He is here, she said simply. Hard hammering, I wiped my hands on my work apron and stepped outside. Gabriel stood beside a sleek silver sedan, designer sunglasses perched on his perfectly coiffed hair, examining the humble farmhouse with visible distaste. He wore the casual but expensive travel outfit I recognized from countless business trips. Tailored chinos, a button-down that probably cost more than a week's profit from our olive oil. He didn't notice me at first, giving me precious seconds to steady myself. This man, who had once been the center of my universe, now looked somehow smaller, less substantial against the backdrop of ancient olive trees and weathered stone buildings that had become my home. Gabriel, I called, my voice calmer than expected. He turned. The shock that registered on his face was almost comical. His eyes traveled from my work boots to my sun-browned arms, lingering on my unstyled hair, pulled back in a simple chignon. I watched recognition battle with disbelief across his features. My God, Alexis, what happened to you? The familiar disapproving tone that once would have sent me scrambling to fix whatever he found lacking now merely washed over me like a wave against rock. Life happened, I replied, taking measured steps toward him. What are you doing here, Gabriel? He removed his sunglasses, his practiced charm sliding into place as he extended his arms. I've come to take you home, of course. This has gone on long enough, don't you think, whatever point you were trying to make? This isn't about making a point, I interrupted, stopping well outside his reach. This is about making a life. His smile faltered. Behind me, I heard the quiet shuffling of Elena and Nikos emerging from the house. Though they couldn't understand our words, they positioned themselves within view, silent guardians. Damning, ready to intervene if needed. Gabriel noticed them, his expression hardening. Are these the people you've been staying with? Have they been holding you here? Because if so, they've been teaching me, I cut in, about olive farming, about community, about kindness without conditions. I gestured toward the groves surrounding us. I'm part owner now. I have a business here. Disbelief crossed his face, followed quickly by the condescension I knew all too well. A business? Alexis, be serious. You're a designer, not a farmer. This is what some eat, pray, love phase. After our fight, I admit I shouldn't have left you in Italy. It was a stupid, drunken mistake. I've apologized. Now it's time to come home. You've apologized? I echoed. When? In what universe does tracking me down and demanding I return count as an apology? His jaw tightened, the charm evaporating. Fine, I'm sorry. I left you in Italy. It was immature and wrong. Is that what you want to hear? Can we move past this now? Why did you even look for me, Gabriel? It's been months. Why now? He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the elderly couple watching us intently. Can we discuss this privately, in the car perhaps? They don't speak English, and I have nothing to hide from them. Why now? His shoulders slumped slightly. Your parents have been calling. Friends asking questions at events. Clients wondering why you're not at the house when they visit. It looks, he trailed off. Bad for your image. I finished for him. It damaged your reputation. Our reputation, he corrected sharply. Our life together. The one we built over 10 years of marriage. The one you built, I countered. This isn't you, he insisted, desperation edging into his voice. The Alexis I know wouldn't choose manual labor and poverty over comfort and position. I smiled, recognizing the fundamental truth in his statement. You're right, the Alexis you knew wouldn't have. But that woman died in Italy when her husband abandoned her as a joke. The woman standing before you made different choices. Elena approached then, pressing something into my hand. The partnership agreement we'd signed. Though she couldn't follow our words, she'd sensed the moment had come. I unfolded the document and held it toward Gabriel. I have legal ties here now. A business partnership. Responsibilities to people who value me for my contributions, not my appearance or social connections. His face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. Whatever game you're playing, it's not a game, I interrupted, reaching into my pocket for the envelope Katerina had prepared. These are divorce papers, Gabriel, already filed, with provisions for the division of assets. He stared at the envelope as if it might burn him. You can't be serious. You'd throw away everything. For this? He gestured dismissively at the modest farm. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm choosing something better. Something real. I stepped forward, placing the envelope in his rigid hand. You left me, Gabriel. You drove away laughing. You just never expected I'd find my way without you. His fingers closed reflexively around the papers, his expression cycling through shock, anger, and finally wounded pride. You'll regret this, he said, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. When the novelty wears off, when you're still hauling olives in the hot sun at 60, you'll remember what you gave up. Maybe, I conceded, but I'd rather risk regret from choices I made than live with the certainty of regret from choices made for me. Nico stepped forward then, placing a weathered hand on my shoulder. Though he couldn't understand our exchange, he recognized the conclusion in our body language. He said something in Greek to Gabriel, his tone firm, but not unkind. Gabriel glanced at me. What did he say? He said the road back to Athens is dangerous after dark. You should leave now to reach the city before nightfall. Gabriel looked between us, finally registering that this wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a rescue. It was a goodbye. Without another word, he turned, returning to his rental car. The divorce papers were still clutched in his hand as the vehicle disappeared down the dirt road. Elena slipped her hand into mine. Together, the three of us turned toward the house. My house now, too. The evening's work awaited. Oil samples to catalog. Dinner to prepare. Tomorrow's market inventory to check. My husband had once abandoned me in a foreign country, assuming I'd be helpless without him. Assuming I'd come crawling back once I'd learned my lesson. Instead, I had found fertile ground to plant new roots, stronger and deeper than he could have imagined. Sometimes the cruelest actions yield the greatest gifts. Trying to break me, Gabriel had accidentally set me free.